The temple did not rise from the planet's surface. It hovered above it, suspended in quiet defiance of gravity, wrapped in slow-moving rings of light that pulsed like the breathing of a living god. Below it, forests of translucent trees stretched toward the sky, their branches glowing faintly whenever the wind passed through them. The air was so still that even sound seemed hesitant to exist. Inside the temple, silence was not emptiness. It was discipline. She stood alone at the center of a circular chamber carved from crystal stone, her posture perfect, her breathing measured, her expression composed beyond emotion. To her people, she was not merely a guardian of tradition, she was tradition made flesh. From the day she had been chosen, her life had been shaped by vows, rituals, and expectations so ancient that no one remembered who had written them first. Purity was not simply a rule. It was her identity. Yet tonight something felt different. The chamber was lit by floating orbs of pale blue light that responded to her thoughts. Each time her focus wavered, the orbs flickered, revealing a truth she would never admit aloud. Her mind was no longer still. Somewhere beyond the temple walls, beyond the sacred texts, beyond the rituals she could recite in her sleep, a question had taken root in her thoughts. What if perfection was not peace? She had learned about humans in fragments, broken transmissions intercepted by scholars, old diplomatic archives, scattered cultural records preserved by interstellar observers. Humans were described as chaotic, emotional, impulsive, and endlessly contradictory. And yet, strangely, they survived where countless civilizations had collapsed. They loved fiercely, fought recklessly, laughed loudly, and refused to follow any destiny written for them. Her people believed humans were spiritually unbalanced. She believed the opposite. In the privacy of her chamber, far from the eyes of devotees and elders, she replayed human recordings again and again. Voices arguing, laughing, confessing feelings, making mistakes without shame. None of it fit into the strict architecture of her world. And yet something in those voices felt alive. She placed her hand over her chest, where her heart responded with a rhythm too fast for meditation. This was not supposed to happen. Her vow was older than her memories. From childhood she had been taught that desire was distraction, attachment was weakness, and choice was danger. The highest form of existence was obedience to cosmic order. To question that order was to invite chaos. But what if chaos was not destruction? What if it was freedom? The thought was terrifying and irresistible. She stepped forward, bare feet barely touching the crystal floor. In the center of the chamber lay an ancient symbol carved into the stone, one that had not been used in centuries. It was forbidden not because it was evil, but because it was unpredictable. It was said to summon beings not bound by the temple's laws. Her fingers trembled as she traced the symbol. "This is foolish," she whispered to herself. The orbs dimmed slightly, as if they disagreed. She hesitated only once more before kneeling and beginning the ritual. Her voice was soft at first, then steadier, as she recited words she had memorized in secret. The air shifted. The light around her tightened, spiraling inward. The symbol beneath her began to glow, responding not to tradition, but to intention. She did not ask for a god. She did not ask for wisdom. She asked for a human. When the light finally exploded outward, she shielded her eyes, heart racing in a way meditation had never taught her to control. The chamber filled with unfamiliar energy, warm and erratic, like a storm wrapped in flesh. Then, abruptly, silence returned. She lowered her hand. Someone was standing in the center of the symbol. He was not glowing. He was not divine. He was not even calm. He was confused. He looked around the chamber with wide eyes, his posture stiff, his clothes rumpled as if he had been pulled out of somewhere he did not expect to leave. His expression carried a mix of disbelief, suspicion, and the faintest hint of irritation. "Okay," he said slowly, his voice echoing awkwardly in the sacred chamber. "Either I just died, or someone seriously messed up a meeting." She stared at him. This was not what she had imagined. Humans in the archives were dramatic, heroic, terrifying, inspiring. This one looked like he had been arguing with the schedule 5 seconds ago. He turned toward her. Their eyes met. For a moment neither spoke. He blinked first. Hi! The words sounded impossibly small in the vast temple. She felt her pulse spike again. She stepped forward cautiously, as if approaching a rare artifact that might shatter if touched. Up close, he looked even less divine. There was no aura of cosmic wisdom, no ceremonial armor, no sign of spiritual mastery. Just a man standing in the middle of a sacred chamber, trying very hard not to panic. You are, she began, then paused, searching for the right title. He raised an eyebrow. Pretty sure I'm not supposed to be here. Her mind raced. The ritual had worked. But the result felt wrong. Or perhaps it felt too real. You have been summoned, she said carefully. By who? By me. He looked around again, taking in the floating orbs, the crystal walls, the glowing symbols beneath his feet. Right. Of course. That explains everything. She tilted her head slightly, studying him the way scholars studied ancient relics. His emotional state was transparent, fluctuating in ways her people would consider spiritually unstable. Yet there was something strangely grounding about him, as if reality itself had followed him into the temple. You are human, she said. Last time I checked. Her lips parted slightly. This was it. The legendary beings she had studied in secret, now standing before her, breathing, speaking, existing outside the rigid laws of her world. You have been chosen to teach me, she said. He froze. Teach you what? She hesitated. Saying it aloud felt more dangerous than the ritual itself. How humans control desire, she said softly. He stared at her, as if she had just asked him to explain the physics of the universe using kitchen utensils. For the first time in her life, she felt something she could not name. It was not devotion. It was not fear. It was possibility. And somewhere deep inside her, the vow that had once felt eternal began to feel negotiable. The human blinked, still taking in the chamber, the floating orbs, and the faint hum that vibrated through the crystal floors. He opened his mouth, clearly ready to say something about this is insane. But the words never quite formed. She was watching him with an intensity that made even the calmest diplomat squirm. She was upright, poised, a paragon of self-control, yet something in the way her eyes flickered suggested anticipation, a curiosity that had nothing to do with rituals or cosmic law. He cleared his throat. Look, I don't know what you think I can teach you about humans controlling desire, but I can tell you right now, humans are kind of terrible at it. She tilted her head slightly. Terrible? Her voice was melodic, precise, and heavy with judgment. She had expected reverence, awe, perhaps even fear. Terrible was not what she had rehearsed in her mind. Yes, he said, stepping carefully over the glowing symbol beneath his feet. We fail constantly. We get distracted. We yell at each other. We make mistakes. A lot of mistakes. You probably think that's chaos, but it's actually life. She frowned. Her lips pressed together. Life without order is dangerous, she said firmly. The human accounts I studied spoke of courage, love, and… She hesitated, her voice softening. Joy. How do you achieve such imbalance without catastrophe? He shrugged, a gesture that made his shoulders rise unevenly. Mostly luck, honestly. And stubbornness. And screaming into the void sometimes helps. For a moment, the chamber was silent, save for the low hum of the crystal floors. The orbs flickered, responding to her emotion, or perhaps to his sheer audacity. Her heart rate increased in a way she did not understand, and her hands twitched at her sides. She was supposed to be a vessel of control, yet something about this human was unraveling her with every word. Then, she said finally, we shall begin your lessons. Her voice carried the weight of tradition, the gravity of sacred ritual. You will demonstrate to me the human methods of navigating desire. He blinked. Like a practical tutorial? Yes. A demonstration. A discipline. He pinched the bridge of his nose. Right. Sure. Step 1. Humans are mostly just figuring it out as they go along. There isn't a method. There's chaos. Lots of it. She frowned, unconvinced. Chaos is unacceptable in a temple. Discipline is required. Well, he said, leaning against a crystal pillar, then I guess we're going to invent some human discipline for aliens. Her expression hardened. Invent? Yeah, you know, improvise, adapt, make it messy and call it intentional. He grinned, seeing her disbelief. It works for us. The first lesson was simple enough in theory. Sit silently and attempt to focus on controlling the breath, controlling thoughts, controlling desires. But in practice, it was an absolute disaster. The human tried to follow instructions, sitting cross-legged on the polished floor, attempting the meditative positions she demonstrated with flawless precision. He fidgeted, coughed, and occasionally muttered sarcastic commentary under his breath. The priestess's eyes narrowed with each failed attempt. Every time he wavered, she corrected posture, adjusted hand positions, and issued solemn guidance that he mostly ignored. Yet somehow, despite his lack of discipline, the energy in the chamber shifted. It became warmer, more unpredictable, more alive. Your human methods are lacking, she said finally, exasperated. Why is controlling the mind so difficult? He raised an eyebrow. Because humans have minds. Minds like yours would probably just snap after 10 seconds of this. And you're not even trying to cheat yet. Her lips twitched, almost a smile, though she quickly suppressed it. She could feel her pulse accelerating, a sensation she could not account for. Something about his laughter, his casual disregard for her precise teachings, was intoxicating. The next day, the lessons escalated. She had prepared ritual simulations to test his understanding of desire. These involved floating crystals that glowed according to emotional intensity, reflective pools meant to mirror inner thoughts, and symbolic gestures designed to force confrontation with temptation. The human participated with reluctance. He made jokes, stumbled over the ceremonial steps, and at one point accidentally toppled a crystal, sending it rolling across the floor. She gasped in horror, rushing to catch it before it shattered. That crystal is sacred, she hissed. He grinned sheepishly. Sorry, it's just a rock. Pretty, sure, but still a rock. Her indignation only made her cheeks warm, though she told herself it was indignation and nothing else. She instructed him to kneel before the pools and confront the reflections of his own desires. He squinted into the water, seeing himself as an awkward, panicked human trapped in alien ceremony, and whispered, Well, I guess this is about right. Her eyes widened at his irreverence, yet she could not deny the sensation growing inside her, a mixture of frustration, amusement, and something unnamed. She realized that this human, utterly untrained in any spiritual practice, was teaching her more than she expected. He was showing her that imperfection was not failure, that laughter could exist alongside ritual, that desire could exist without shame. As the days passed, the lessons became increasingly bizarre. She designed a trial of temptation, which involved meditating next to glowing pheromone crystals while imagining human impulses. He stared at her seriously for a long moment, then burst out laughing. You realize you've basically invented a cosmic adult game, right? Her frown deepened. This is no game. It is a sacred trial. He leaned back against a pillar, clearly enjoying himself. Sacred trial or not, you look ridiculous trying to maintain perfect focus while I'm, whatever it is I'm doing. She felt heat rise to her cheeks again. The ritual demanded her total concentration, yet she found herself distracted by the human's mere presence. He was unremarkable in every objective sense, and yet she could not stop noticing the tilt of his head, the way his eyes narrowed when he thought, the careless charm that seemed to follow him like a faint aura. One evening, after a particularly chaotic meditation, he collapsed against the wall, laughing. Okay, I give up. Humans are terrible at controlling desire. You're better off inventing a new ritual entirely. She sighed, exhausted, frustrated, yet strangely exhilarated. You have disrupted my discipline entirely, she said, her voice softer than intended. And you. he said, sitting up and smiling at her, are learning that being perfect is overrated. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, silence folding over the chamber like a living thing. Neither spoke. Neither moved. Somewhere deep inside her, the vow she had carried for decades felt suddenly heavier. She realized it was not the vow itself that constrained her, but the fear that had always accompanied it, the fear of making her own choice. And for the first time, she considered the possibility that perhaps, just perhaps, she did not need to be perfect. The lessons would continue, more ridiculous and more enlightening with every passing day, and neither of them realized how much they were changing each other, step by chaotic step. The temple's chambers were quiet now, though the echoes of laughter and chaos from the humans' previous missteps still lingered in the air like faint incense. She sat cross-legged on the polished floor, her hands folded neatly in her lap, yet her mind was anything but composed. She had spent countless cycles of her life in perfect meditation, honing her body and spirit into instruments of discipline, but the lessons with him had unraveled all of that in the most unpredictable and delightful way. She could feel her pulse in the rhythm of the chamber, could feel the residual warmth of his presence still lingering in the corners, like some unpredictable human aura that refused to be ignored. He was sprawled across a floating platform that hovered lazily near the center, feet dangling over the edge, arms behind his head, and that irrepressible grin plastered across his face. He was supposed to be teaching her, demonstrating some form of human balance or self-restraint, yet he seemed utterly content to ignore the instructions in favor of observation and commentary. "You're taking this way too seriously," he said, his voice teasing as it drifted across the room. "Humans don't even do meditation properly. We mostly just sit and try not to think about lunch or our neighbor's weird habits." Her eyes narrowed, a combination of irritation and fascination tugging at her chest. "The point," she replied, "is to understand control, discipline, focus. These are not trivial matters." "Right," he said, stretching lazily. "And yet here we are, me sprawled out, you glaring, both of us probably wasting sacred energy. Perfect control achieved." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she focused on him as though by sheer concentration she could make him understand the weight of tradition, the importance of ritual, the magnitude of what her people had sacrificed for centuries. And yet she found herself questioning the purpose of it all. For all the structure, all the rules and decrees, she felt a strange emptiness, a sensation that the human, with his reckless laughter and utter disregard for convention, had somehow filled without meaning to. "Why do you persist in this?" she asked suddenly, her voice softer, almost unguarded. "If humans are so unbalanced, why bother with rituals at all?" He raised an eyebrow, amused. "Because even unbalanced humans need a little order now and then. And besides," he said, leaning forward and resting his elbows on his knees, "you seem like someone who's trying really hard to figure something out." The words struck her in a way she could not articulate. She had always been certain of her path, the vow, the temple, the endless cycle of teaching and discipline. Yet here he was, a being entirely foreign to her understanding, speaking as though he could see the turbulence she had hidden beneath years of composure. "You do not understand," she said, though the edge in her voice had softened. "I have never chosen my own path. My life, my vows, they were chosen for me. Every action, every thought, every ritual was determined before I could speak." He studied her for a moment, his expression a mixture of amusement and something softer, something that bordered on empathy. "You've been living someone else's script your whole life," he said. "No wonder you're curious about how humans manage their chaos. We're improvisers. We mess up constantly, but we keep going. We make our own rules as we go." Her chest tightened at the simplicity of his explanation, at the truth it carried. For the first time, she considered the possibility that her perfection might not be the pinnacle of existence she had been taught it was. Perhaps choice, even flawed, even messy, was more valuable than the flawless obedience she had clung to for so long. But to abandon the vows, she murmured, almost to herself, would be to risk dishonor. To risk everything. And to follow them blindly, he said, leaning closer. would be to risk never knowing yourself. She blinked, startled by the precision of his words. There was no ceremony here, no sacred text, no divine mandate, just a human, speaking plainly, and for some reason it carried more weight than any ritual she had ever performed. The chamber felt smaller suddenly, the walls closing in not with judgment but with intimacy, with potential. You do not understand fear, she admitted finally. Not the fear of desire, but the fear of choosing one's own destiny. To act freely is terrifying. I have never acted freely. He leaned back, stretching again, that casual posture infuriatingly calm. Terrifying, yes. But also necessary. Humans choose, humans fail, humans succeed, and through it all we live. It's messy, chaotic, unpredictable, but it's ours. You can't know what freedom feels like until you try it. Her hands twitched at her sides, almost involuntarily. She could feel her vow, that lifeline of tradition and expectation, pressing against her, heavy and insistent. And yet, alongside it, a spark of something unfamiliar flickered, curiosity, desire, hope. Perhaps it was foolish, reckless even, but she could not deny it. The human laughed then, a low, genuine sound that carried across the crystal floor. Look at us. You, the most disciplined being in your civilization, and me, the guy who fails at everything except showing up. And somehow, you're learning something about yourself, and I'm just here trying not to break anything sacred. She allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. The corners of her lips twitched, betraying the careful control she had maintained for decades. He noticed immediately, his grin widening. There it is, he said, nodding appreciatively. That's your first lesson in human imperfection. Smiles come from choice, not command. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, not from ritual, not from meditation, but from something entirely uncharted. She realized then that the lessons she had been expecting, lessons in desire, in control, in human ways, were not simply about him teaching her. They were about her discovering the capacity to think, to question, to feel, to choose. And yet, she said, voice low and careful, the more I learn, the more I see how much I have never chosen. He shrugged, leaning back comfortably. Welcome to humanity, I guess. It's chaotic. It's messy. It's terrifying. And sometimes it's exactly what you need. Her pulse quickened, not with ritual focus but with the strange exhilaration of possibility. For the first time, she wondered what it would mean to act for herself, to test the boundaries of her existence, to allow imperfection to enter her world. You are different from what I expected, she admitted, almost in a whisper. And you're a lot more fun than I expected, he replied, grinning. Let's see how far this chaos can take us. The chamber, once rigid with tradition, now seemed alive. Every floating orb, every reflection, every hum of the crystal resonated with something new, potential. And somewhere in the midst of the sacred chaos, she realized she was no longer just a priestess performing rituals. She was a being on the brink of her first real choice. And for the first time, she did not feel fear. The chamber felt heavier that evening, though the air itself remained unchanged. The orbs floated lazily above, pulsing faintly, as if they, too, had sensed a shift. She stood at the center of the room, hands folded, chest rising and falling with the careful rhythm she had mastered over countless cycles. Yet mastery now felt like a cage, and for the first time, she recognized it. The human sat across from her, sprawled against a low crystal pedestal, observing her with that irrepressible mixture of amusement and curiosity that had, inexplicably, become comforting. You're thinking, he said casually, tilting his head, and I can see it from here. I am contemplating, she replied, her voice measured but softer than usual. Contemplating what it means to act freely. To choose. He smirked, leaning forward on his elbows. Freedom is terrifying. Humans don't really like it either. But we survive it. Somehow we always manage. She allowed herself a faint smile, though it was tinged with unease. Her vow had been absolute, unyielding, and yet here she was, entertaining thoughts that would have been considered sacrilege by her own people. And she was not alone in these thoughts. The human's presence, his laughter, his insistence on imperfection, had opened a space inside her she had never occupied before. "I summoned you," she said quietly, "not only to teach me, but perhaps to guide me toward courage I lacked. And yet every lesson you give seems to unbalance me even further." He shrugged, a gesture that somehow managed to be both casual and profound. "Maybe that's the point. Humans don't grow by following rules perfectly. We grow by stumbling, by failing, by making choices and living with them. You've never stumbled before. Maybe it's time." Her pulse quickened. The weight of the temple's expectations pressed upon her, but beneath that weight, something lighter began to stir, a curiosity, a daring, a whisper of something forbidden. She took a step toward him, then another, hesitant, measuring each movement as though it could alter destiny itself. "The others will discover this," she murmured, almost to herself. "They will see the summoning as a violation. You are not permitted to exist here. And yet—" He raised an eyebrow, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. "And yet here I am. And you're thinking about choices instead of consequences. That's progress." Her hands twitched. The vow she had carried for so long, the lifeline of her identity, felt suddenly negotiable. Not because she desired to defy her people, but because she recognized the truth of his words. Choice, however terrifying, was a kind of freedom she had never allowed herself. "They would see you as dangerous," she whispered. "They would demand your departure. And you'd let them?" he asked softly, though the edge of teasing remained. She shook her head. "I do not know. Perhaps I would follow tradition. Perhaps I would choose." He leaned back, observing her with something akin to admiration. "Choosing is hard. But it's the only way to really live. You can follow your vows perfectly and still be empty. Or you can stumble and discover things you never imagined." Her gaze fell to the glowing symbols beneath her feet. Each one had once represented order, discipline, and obedience. Now they shimmered with unpredictability, reflecting not cosmic law but human chaos. And in that reflection, she saw something she had never acknowledged: desire, not only for knowledge, not only for understanding, but for the freedom to act for herself, to make her own choices, to embrace imperfection without shame. She began, then stopped, breath catching. "I do not fear desire." He tilted his head, intrigued. "You don't?" "No," she said firmly. "I fear the consequences of my choice. I fear taking the first step. But the desire itself, it is not wrong. Perhaps it is necessary." The human nodded slowly. "Then you're ready. Ready to choose for yourself, not for anyone else. Ready to break the script." She took a deliberate step closer, and he did not flinch. His presence had become a touchstone, a strange combination of stability and unpredictability, grounding yet exhilarating. She realized then that the lessons had never been about controlling desire, or teaching, or ritual. They had been about courage. The courage to act, to question, to redefine her own existence. Outside the chamber, the temple began to stir. The elders and disciples sensed the summoning's anomaly and approached, their voices raised in alarm. Their sacred order was threatened. Tradition demanded immediate action. But she remained unmoved, the first real decision she had ever made burning brightly in her chest. "This is my choice," she declared aloud, voice ringing through the crystal walls. "Not tradition. Not fear. Not obligation. My choice." The human looked at her, smiling. "Finally. Took you long enough." She allowed herself to step fully into the circle of light, feeling its warmth and unpredictability, feeling the pulse of possibility ripple through her. She no longer felt constrained by the vow itself, but by the fear of using her own will. That fear had lifted. She had embraced it, and in doing so, she had embraced herself. The elders arrived at the chamber doors, shocked by the presence of the human, and the undeniable shift in the priestess. Their questions, their accusations, their expectations of outrage were met with calm defiance. She had chosen. That was all. The human stood beside her, not as a savior, not as a teacher, but as proof that choice was not only possible, it was powerful. The temple trembled in response, not with destruction, but with awakening. Traditions did not shatter, they evolved. And the priestess, once bound by a vow older than her memories, smiled genuinely for the first time in her life. "Thank you," she whispered, not for breaking her vow, but for showing her how to choose, how to act, how to embrace life on her own terms. He grinned, the casual charm that had disarmed her for weeks returning full force. "Well, that's what humans are good at. Chaos, choices, laughter. Welcome to the club." She laughed softly, the sound echoing through the chamber, blending with the hum of the crystals, the flicker of the orbs, and the warmth of possibility. The vow was no longer a cage. It was a starting point, and her destiny was hers to define. And somewhere between the sacred ritual, the human's irreverence, and the weight of centuries of tradition, the priestess discovered something she had never known, that courage, laughter, and choice together were more sacred than any vow could ever be.